创伤概览的公益大师课啊，很高兴能够和各位同行朋友们用学习的方式度过一个星期二的晚上。我是今天的主持人田真明啊，我同样也是一位心理咨询师啊。那我们今天的课程呢是1个半小时，前面的50分钟我们会给大家播放这个我们录制好的关于发展型创伤概览的课程。那我们剩下的40分钟呢，会有一个老师的在线 Q&A 问答。对于创伤这个领域感兴趣的各位同行朋友，大概会了解到我们其实现在有非常非常多不同的创伤分类，从这个惊吓创伤到代际创伤，再到复杂性创伤，再到今天大家会听到的这个发展型创伤等等。那发展型创伤呢，它往往是一个非常长期的、潜移默化的。那么它的疗愈和处理方向常常会绕不开这个情绪部分的工作，所以我们今天呢就邀请了情绪具身疗法 ISP 的创始人 Raja Selvam 老师来为我们开设这一节公益的公开课。那 Raja 老师同时也是体感疗愈 Somatic Experiencing 的资深讲师，那他在使用情绪来处理这个发展型创伤方面呢有非常深厚的经验。那在 SE 里面受训的北京小伙伴们对这位老师是非常的熟悉了。那么我们为了节省翻译的时间，待会儿大家会看到的这个视频呢是我们提前录制好并且加上了字幕的视频，是我们上个月的时候在土耳其参加的这个 Bodynamic International Conference 这个躯体发展分析它的一个国际会议，然后当时 Raja 老师也是在那边去做一个他的讲座所以我们非常有幸的就抓住了 Raja 老师，然后让他们来给我们讲一讲这个发展型创伤。那在今天的这1个半小时的课程里面呢，大家会大概听到接下来的这几个部分哈。首先呢，就是一个关于发展7阶段的概述，然后就是在哪一个阶段我们可能会有一些什么样的需求，如果没有被满足的话，会导致什么样的后果，在我们的成年人的这种生活里面会有一些什么样的表现。然后同时呢，我们会为大家提供一份翻译好的关于怎么评估，就是我现在到底是在哪一个发展阶段，或者我的来访在哪个发展阶段也许出现了这个发展性创伤，然后如何去做这个评估的一份量表。那在最后呢，会附上和这个发展性创伤相关话题的更多的资源。那么我们今天呢，大家如果在观看的过程之中有问题，欢迎大家留言到我们的留言板上我们尽量在全程都保持麦克风的关闭然后其次呢，就是在提问的时候，为一同创造一个安全的共同学习的空间我也非常建议大家最好不要提关于个人议题的问题，因为这样的话可能会在没有隐私或者边界保护的情况下对您造成伤害，或者是有些意想不到的状态哈。所以我们一起来共同的守护这个学习的空间。那么我们接下来呢，就有请 Lenny 来为我们播放提前录制好的发展型创伤概览课程。Then you're also the SE trainer and 各位小伙伴大家好，欢迎来到新浪潮。今天呢，在我身边是 Raja Selvam， 我们的资深的心理咨询师，然后他同时呢也有心理学的博士背景，他是北京 SE Somatic Experiencing 的资深讲师。那今天我们和他一起呢，将会来聊一聊关于发展型创伤这个话题。I was just introducing you.And telling that you have a PhD in psychology. And then you're also the SE trainer. And we are here today, very honored to have you to talk about the topic on developmental trauma.
Yeah.
So Raja, tell us, how do you define developmental trauma?
A child goes through different stages of childhood. In each stage, it is trying to acquire new abilities. The abilities that are innate to human beings, but they need a nurturing environment for the abilities to develop. For example, if people are being inappropriate, sexually, for example, in the love sexuality stage of development, which goes from 3 to 6 years of age, for those of you who know Freudian psychoanalysis, it's the Oedipal stage. The child is sexual. It's exploring its sexuality because its genitals are developing and sexual glands are developing. gets interested in, it has sexual impulses, and it's curious about the differences between boys and girls, and so on. It's universal, yeah? This is nature, right? Now, how it develops into a healthy adult in relation to sexuality, it depends on how the environment interacts with it. For example, if it is shamed or beaten or ridiculed, when it starts to be curious about its sexual organs or the sexual organs of the other gender, then it starts to have an unhealthy attitude toward its own sexuality, sexual organs, etc. This can then, of course, become a problem when the child is an adult in marriage or a relationship. Yeah. So if it is met well, in the sense that if it's met with understanding and support, that it's okay to have sexual impulses, even as a young child, and it's okay for it to be curious about, the differences between boys and girls, the sexual organs, then it grows up into an adult with a healthy attitude towards genitals and sexuality and so on. However, what if it's beaten? What if it's shamed? What if it's ridiculed? Then the child starts to have a very disturbed sense of its sexuality, relationship that is sexual, right? Now, that we would call a developmental trauma, that it's shamed for its sexuality in the appropriate stage of development, the love sexuality stage of development. Yeah. So a developmental trauma are events that happen to the child in the course of its development that thwart or damage the child's innate developmental arc. That's what is a developmental trauma.
Yeah. I think that's a very concrete example. As you're talking about like sexualities, I have two questions coming to my mind. So do you see like developmental trauma has very distinct features in different cultures? Because when you talk about sexuality, I can almost like pinpoint that in some Eastern culture, we're more conservative. In Western cultures, more okay with it. Then do you see it as like a collective trauma to some culture versus some other culture?
Yeah, each culture has a different attitude towards sexuality, right? The cultural differences. But within each culture, there is what is considered to be healthy, right? We are talking about deviations from the norm. We don't think of cultural differences in themselves as the cause of developmental trauma, even though a point can be made. I'll give you another example. Yeah, for example, all human beings throughout their lives need support to make sense of their emotions, to have their emotions supported, to make sense of them, to express them, etc. Now, the attitude toward emotions varies considerably from culture to culture. And that can actually come in the way of development of the individual. But that in itself cannot be thought of as the source of developmental trauma. Within that culture, in this culture, they handle emotions this way. I mean, every culture has to handle emotions. Yeah, we're talking about how they handle emotions, right? And some cultures might think one way of handling it is healthy. Some cultures think that it's not healthy, and so on. But within the culture, given the common ways in which emotions are, understood and held and supported, etc., there can be variations. Some people are more emotionally inhibited than others, and that causes them problems in communication and relationship, etc. So we're looking at cultural, we're looking at to what extent is the deviation significant from the cultural norm that leads to dysfunction for the individual.
I think that's a very good explanation, and it also made me think.
Everybody has emotions, and everybody uses emotional information. That is the new understanding. How they deal with it, how they understand it, that varies from culture to culture.
I'm just thinking about a very specific group of people who are, for example, immigrants or migrant people who, in China, there's this wave in around like 80, 90, where the big cities around the coast start to develop. So a lot of people start to migrate from inland China to the coastal side. And that itself is like a cross-culture thing. And I'm just wondering, for people who grow up in different cultures, will that manifest in their developmental stage? And will that cause more confusions in their developmental trauma forming or things like that?
Are we talking about people who have migrated from rural Chinese areas to coastal urban areas, right?
Because I can think of the culture context and norms could be very different.
As adults or as children?
As children mostly, because their families migrate, and then I myself is actually one of them.
Yeah.
And then I migrate when I was a child.
Yeah. But this can be an opportunity because children learn, when I talked about the mediation by the environment that is necessary, the nurture component of it, the parents play an important role. But the whole society plays an important role. So if the child is moving from a culture, subculture, I would say, that's emotionally inhibited to a culture that is emotionally more open, in schools, other children, with teachers, etc., they have the possibility of becoming more open emotionally. Now, whether or not that is good, depends on the individual and their lives. But
yeah, you also mentioned sexuality as a stage. Could you also briefly talk about what are some stages in developmental and what are psychologists look into when they study developmental trauma?
I use somatic developmental psychology. Primarily, that's the model I use. I also bring in other developmental psychological models that are not somatic oriented.
Okay.
I combine them. And in body dynamic analysis, it's a Danish body psychotherapy system, probably the best somatic developmental psychology model out there today. There are 7 stages of development, starting from conception in the womb. Yeah, the first stage of development is called existence. The time frame is approximate. What is important is the theme. Yeah, and you remember that in each stage of development, the child internalizes a certain relationship with the world, develops a certain self-understanding. Now, this is not in terms of language; it's implicit. Now we know that all cognition, emotion, behavior are instantaneously simultaneous. In fact, they arise from the body. So in that stage of development, the child needs to internalize certain things, that he needs to feel that it is safe to be in this body, in this world, the body of the world and my body, right? Does this world, the body of the world, is it safe for this body or not, right? So then it feels safe. That's primary. It's called existential safety. Right? Existential safety. And now something can happen. For example, there's a big calamity in the family, an earthquake, or in the environment, or war breaks out, or the husband dies. So that's a shock to the family system. And that shock translates into very unbearable states, bodily states in the body. You can call it emotional, somatic states. And it internalizes, it is not safe to be in this body, in this body. In this body means the mother's body, which is the body of the world, until it comes out of the womb. So then it internalizes the sense that this body is not safe because the world is not safe for the body. So that's one theme. And in that stage, there are other themes. There are other themes. I'm okay. Existential worth. What is it? I'm okay. Unconditionally, I'm just okay.
Mm.
You know, wherever I am, there's a deep sense that I'm okay. Now, if I have birth trauma, I nearly died along with my mother, and that's one of the reasons why I'm interested in this topic very much, pre and perinatal trauma, in the pre and perinatal stage of development, which is also the existential stage of development as far as developmental psychology is concerned. So I shrink when I feel that the world is not safe. And so the natural connectivity I have with the world energetically, you know, electromagnetically, quantum mechanically is diminished. Then will I feel connected to the world? Will I feel that a sense of belonging? I don't. You know, for example, people also experience this temporarily after earthquakes. My body is not safe in this body of the world because the earth is moving under me, it can kill me, right? But that's temporary. You can work that through. But this one, the child is in, let's say it's in the womb of the mother who smokes constantly or is taking drugs, or the mother who is feeling very unsafe because she's had a history of trauma that made her body feel unsafe in the world. Now the child is soaking in this physical experience, and it's there for 9 months or 10 months, and then, you know, and after it's born, it's also relating to the same mother in the resonance. You know, our bodies are quite capable of picking up what other people are feeling, right? But that I call interpersonal resonance. So you have the sense that, you know, I shut, you know, it's not safe, that's existential safety, but am I okay? You know, do I belong? No, I don't. If I don't have a sense I belong, then later on I would say, put words to it and say, I don't belong no matter where I go. I feel like, why do I, you know, there's something wrong with me. So these are some of the themes. So I just talked about 1 or 2 themes in the existential stage of development. And for the sake of time, I will just give you another example, right? For example, after birth to 2 years of age, the child's needs are very basic, right? What does it need? It needs basic nutrition, timely nutrition. It needs body comfort, that the diaper needs to be changed so that it's not, it's not cold from diaper not being changed. And when it is distressed and the body, you know, the child that young, physiology is barely maturing, it has all kinds of discomfort. It cries. So there needs to be somebody to what?
Comfort,
Regulate. Physically, yeah. So basic comfort, body comfort, basic nutrition, and then it needs to have a sense of, you know, love, contact. It's sometimes it's in the beginning it's energetic, and then eye contact, that there's loving contact. So these are the basic needs: basic nutrition, basic body comfort, basic, you know, contact, in a loving contact. It doesn't need that much more. It doesn't need an electric car, right? So yeah, so BYD, for example, it doesn't need it. What it needs is that only adult children need it. So if it doesn't get these basic needs met, then the body is constantly either in despair, giving up, or it's in distrust and anger. Now, what if you have this state be in your body for such long periods of time? For example, some time ago, it was very popular to believe that children can be trained to eat at certain times, right from birth. And you have to, medical doctors were advising this. And I know generations of children all over the world were raised that way. So the recommendation was that night you put them in the room and lock the room door, and so that you don't hear them cry, it can distress you. So if the child, then it needs to be fed like adults, not like 8 o'clock in the morning, 12 o'clock, not on demand. but it overlooks the fact that children have limited digestive systems. They can only take in so much, and they need to be fed more often. The child would adapt. The babies can be adapted, but it's traumatic. Its basic needs are not being met. Right? There's no comfort when the distress is there from lack of food and not enough food. And when it needs comfort, it also needs love, the contact. It's not all of it is not there. So these children, their bodies are conditioned to expect what? Despair. When I think of a need, later on, I think of an electric car as an adult, a child that's traumatized in the stage. It'll either have this despairing, whether despair come up immediately as a response, or what? Distrust. Oh, will this car really meet my needs? And even if I get the most expensive electric car, it somehow feels that it's not quite meeting my needs. I expected it to meet, make my life perfect, so to speak, but it isn't. And then in relationship, you can never fulfill such a person. It doesn't matter what you do, there's always what? Distrust or despair. You might not even ask for what you want. What do you want? I don't care. Buy something. It's very difficult to buy something for them. Can't read their mind, right? So these are the problems that can happen because of the developmental traumas to children in the need stage of development. And that sets you up for any needs later on, right? So again, that is the need stage of development. Anna Freud would have called it the oral stage of development, but need sounds better than oral, right? Okay. So, and then the development gets more complex. So the autonomy stage of development, which is an overlapping stage of development, from about 8 months to 2.5 years or age, the child is also learning other things. It's also developing other capabilities to become an adult, functioning adult. And autonomy, it's such a, there's so many developmental functions. So developmental stage can be looked at as a collection of related developmental functions, not necessarily strictly chronologically separate. They can be overlapping. So in this stage, this is the stage in which child learns that it can have an experience, emotion or an impulse, and have support from the adult to make it stronger, make it more durable. All right? And it's about experience, right? So there are children, there are adults who come into therapy or in life. If they have they're having an experience, they'll watch a movie and they really love it. And they want to share it with their partner. And the partner says, what rubbish. Where do you go to school, right? What kind of taste do you have, right? What are they doing? They're saying, they're completely negating it, right? A healthy person from the autonomy stage of development will say, well, you have your taste and I have my taste. I don't have to lose my taste. Somebody who did not have support to be with the experience. And that can happen in different ways. For example, the child brings to the mother this new discovery, an insect or a flower. And it's very excited about it. And the children at that stage, they're exploring the world. The whole world is a playground. And they're interested in that, and they want their interest to be supported, right? So even though the adults might not find it interesting, they might find the smartphone more interesting, right? So they come to the parents and say, oh, look, this flower, it is so nice. The child, how the child will do it? The child say, right? And so what does the adult do? The appropriate response would be, yeah, that's a nice flower. Let's look at it together. So they're also supporting it energetically, right? But as opposed to the response, then when it gets that response, developmental response, the child is able to stay with the experience. Staying with the experience is necessary for the neurological development. Neurological capacity to stay with other experiences in the future. Otherwise, the child will grow up as an adult. It finds this interesting. I sign up for this training. I take this job. It looks very interesting, but I lose interest on the second day. We have people like that, right? Or I find this training, I sign up for this one, I sign up for this one, I get this relationship, my soulmate, 1 week later, devil I'm paired with. So they lose their ability to stay with the experience. And that is such a big disadvantage, right? So how can the parent bring that about? By saying, look at the flower, and the child's the parent says, yeah,
dismissive,
or flower, okay, go play. There's some response, but there's no
connection.
So the child cannot hold it. It needs mirroring and interest in the other. And the parent says, oh, look at what I'm looking at on my phone. Right? Yes. Overriding them with their experience, like the boyfriend or the husband who says, what kind of taste do you have? Let's watch this other movie. So if people have autonomy wounds, then they lose their experience and they feel devastated. You know, it's even more painful than death. And the reason is because our sense of self, we know neurologically, develops from our ability to have strong experiences, stable experiences. Neurologically, we know that the sense of self develops from, it's an abstraction of all experience. If I cannot hold on to an experience for long enough, my sense of self is weak, unstable. And therefore, you can imagine how it would be, you know, to be with somebody who has this sense of self that's weak. You know, you don't know whether the person is there or not. So that's a very rich stage of development. We call it the autonomy stage of development. Yeah, and that's one of in the autonomy stage of development. There are about 7 or 8 themes. Another theme is help. The child who constantly has its experience pushed away. And this is also the stage in which the child develops neurologically, emotionally, especially in the second year of life, and where the prefrontal cortex develops. And then it doesn't get enough support for emotions. It doesn't have enough support for experience. So the child internally knows that it's not good to go and seek support. Like the avoidant attachment style person, the child will be around the parent or as an adult around a partner. It doesn't mean that they don't get in a relationship, but they will not go to them for emotional or any other support. Deep, they will not. They'll have friends to talk to, but they cannot go deep into a relationship in terms of intimacy, for fear that either the experience would be what? Destroyed or discounted. It's so painful. Then all of those things come up. I don't want to deal with it. Yeah. So that's autonomy. It's a very important stage of development, you know. And in a way, the attachment therapy theory, it focuses a lot on one function, developmental function, in the autonomy stage of development, which is what? Emotional support.
I was thinking about that.
So in order to work with developmental trauma, the attachment therapy is very important, very useful. It's relatively simple to grasp and apply. But then, you know, we have other stages of development. For example, a child that is wounded in the existence stage of development, one thing that it will not do is to approach people, for fear that when it gets close to people, its existential terror might come up. Or if it's wounded in the need stage of development, the distress or the despair will not allow this child in the autonomy stage of development to seek emotional support. You see that? So you cannot, even to work with the vulnerabilities that come up when we look at what happens when you approach somebody else for emotional regulation as an attachment therapy, the causes might be in other stages of development. And that is one of the reasons why, the therapist needs to understand what are the different stages of development, what are the different developmental needs in terms of support for developmental functions, and what can happen in different stages of development if the child is not met well by the environment. And more importantly, how will it show up in the clinic, in an adult client who comes to you? Then you get this more sophisticated, framework for diagnosing very accurately, very quickly, what is the source of the developmental trauma. It's one thing to say, yeah, this person is ambivalent or avoidant, but the source might not be only about seeking emotional support. The vulnerability might come from, I could be killed by you, or you will never meet my needs, right? The despair of it, or the existential terror of it.
I think this is a very nuanced and holistic approach when working with adult clients.
Yeah.
And as you're talking about it, it's so detailed. I'm just curious that how do you work with people then? Like for something that is so early, how do you, in attachment theory, there's a lot of the EFT and other things. But in like a somatic approach to developmental trauma, even you see it demonstrated in an adult client.
Yeah.
What are some methods to assess something so early?
Well, to assess?
To like assess.
Yeah, to assess, you have a framework. We have a questionnaire. In fact, for each stage of development, we have a questionnaire, a detailed questionnaire. And I'm sure that you will make it available, And people can take that and see in what areas of their lives do they have difficulties. And we know that if they had developmental trauma in existence or need or autonomy, these are what I call the early stages. There are 4 later stages. If we have time, we'll talk about them. These stages, we can say, ask questions, about such as, do you feel that you belong most of the time? It's all about most of the time, right? Do you belong? Do you feel that you feel wanted or not wanted? Do you feel loved or not loved? Do you feel safe in the world or not safe in the world? And people respond to it. Now, as adults, we're not talking about, because people don't remember these stages, right? I mean, you're talking about existence, need, and autonomy, early stage of development, 2.5 years old. Nobody, or very few people have memories, explicit memories. All of them are body memories. Emotional memories, body memories. Very few people have explicit memories. People only have memories that other people have supplied them, such as, you nearly died in your birth, that kind of thing. Right? You were incubated, etc. Now, I, did not feed you, breastfeed you, or I left you in when you were 2 months old. I had to work in the city, leave you with the grandmother. People might not remember, might not even know that they grew up with the grandparents unless somebody told them, right? So diagnosis is easy. Like, with these questionnaires, how do you feel that your needs are more or less met most of the time, right? Do you distrust or trust that other people can take care of your needs, even sometimes when you don't ask for them? Is it easy to express your needs? You can ask these questions and find out in this life, in current life, current life, because in which, as an adult, in which areas of your life do you have difficulty? And then from there, you can guess, which stage of development these needs relate to. And then you say, oh, need stage of development. And not only that, now this is about, even in relation to needs, some people cannot even sense their needs. Some people can sense them, but they're very distrustful. They will not express them, right? And so even in terms of sensing and expressing one's needs, people vary in relation to their capability. So through this questioning, through the questionnaire, you can pinpoint where they have difficulties. Of course, usually people come with specific problems, right? They don't come to have a developmental trauma in a diagnosis across the board. They come in and they talk about, for example, let me talk about the later stages of development, going back to love sexuality. In the love sexuality stage of development, the child is coming into, budding of romantic love and sexuality. And its attention is drawn to the usually the opposite gender parent. Now, you have to with the same-sex orientation, then you have to modify the theory. But I will talk the conventional theory. Right? The conventional theory, the boy falls in love with the mother and the girl falls in love with the father, and they actually want to replace the same-sex parent. Right? I remember a friend's son, he was around 3 years old, and he was so jealous. I mean, I got together with his mother, and that when I visited them for the first time, they lived in another city, I tried to bribe him with chocolate, and he said, no way, putting his hands behind the back. And then a couple of days later, he came into the bedroom and said, I want to ask you something. And then he got onto the bed and sat crossed-armed and said, I want to tell you something. And I said, what? We are all waiting for you to leave.
So much hostile.
I said, even your mother? Yes, even my mother. He lies. So and then I said to her, he's going to ask you to get married soon. And she said, no, not my son. 2 weeks later, my son asked me to marry him.
Jeez.
And what did he say? I said, you're my son. I can't get married to you. All right? So this is natural, right? So what if the son succeeds? Sometimes the father will make the daughter as the special princess, especially if the father has difficulty with the mother. When I lived in Los Angeles, the manager of the apartment building, he had a daughter with his girlfriend with whom he didn't really want to be, but then the child was born and they stayed together for the sake of the children, for the child, and he was not interested in the child also. He just hung in there. But when she came into this age of being cute and coquettish and flirtatious, seductive, he would offer to take her to school and pick her up from school. And I said to him, Michael, this is going to end, right? I mean, this is a phase. He says, really? He didn't understand that this, and then, but then this girl, she's getting the wrong message, that she can come between her parents and succeed in replacing the mother emotionally. Now, unfortunately, sometimes children get incested in this stage. Then we're entering a deeper trauma. It's not only developmental trauma, shock trauma, because it's such a shock to the system. It shouldn't happen. But so you run into this girl in the 30s, and you might find the following: that she only gets attracted to, even though she's very attractive, etc., she only gets attracted to unavailable men. Men who are in another relationship. You see the
pattern.
The pattern, unavailability, and they're hurting, right? Because it's not, yes, they're told that by the partner who's in another relationship, I'm going to leave, and that is not really that important. I'm there for the sake of children. But this goes on, and then the hurt is there. I'm not fully with you. Just like a child cannot be fully with an adult, right? This is a huge heartbreak. But then what happens if the person actually leaves the wife and gets together? This woman loses interest. because it's in that triangle that there is the libido.
Interesting. Mm-hmm.
This is what Freud pointed out. Now, it's just an old theory, and you see it all the time. So triangle. So then you say, well, you ask, then you know where it goes back to father, mother, this triangle stage of development. Now, this could have also happened when they were teenagers. The love sexuality trauma stage of development can also get repeated when children are teenagers. We see that the primary time is 3 to 6 years of age. Then you start to ask questions about that stage of development, what they remember. You start to ask questions about other relationships that they've had, and you zero in on this heartbreak. What does it feel to feel not that you have to go after the heartbreak? You have to bring it up, the anger, all the feelings, right? So what somatic modalities will do, once you diagnose it and you know what the vulnerabilities are, then to start to work with it in the body. And what the body usually does is that these are unbearable feelings. So the body will shut down by constricting or withdrawing energy from a certain part of the body where the emotion is very painful. The somatic modalities will try to access the emotion, undo the defense, which is not just mental or psychological, but also physical. Work with it through breath, through movement. There are many ways of doing it, right? And for example, in another modality I've developed and teach called Integral Somatic Psychology, ISP, I actually know from neuroscience that the best way to heal an emotion is to expand the emotion in the body. It becomes more tolerable. The brain can process it better. So they have to, when they start to do that, then they start to cognize that, oh, it goes that far back. And I can actually heal it. The more you can tolerate it, the more you can think about it, you can try to transform it. And the very act of expanding it makes it more tolerable. There's an end to it. There's light at the end of the tunnel. Things can transform. And that's how we do it. So diagnosis and then vulnerabilities, I would say diagnosis, vulnerabilities, and then what? The work with vulnerabilities to bring about transformation.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. I think that's a very, very rich answer that you gave. And I also wanted to let our audience know that Raja, we are so honored to invite you to do a demo. And then we will have 3 demos on Chinese theme developmental trauma, which will happen in December. And then Raja will also bring in this very rich system of developmental trauma, which will also be released in February. So if you're interested in this theme and how do you do interventions, do pay attention to information on that. And I think my last question will be, so having this rich system, this perspective, how do you see, like, for example, how do you see the integration of this perspective with other modalities for therapists who work clinically?
Yeah, so there is the presenting problem. I can only get into, the only relationships I find myself attracted to are triangles. Or another theme from love sexuality development is that I can either have my heart open to you or my sexuality open to you, not both. These are stages, which is very common, right? So then you investigate whether it's a problem that goes back to the stage of development, because you can immediately put your finger on it. And then that's one, right? And then vulnerabilities. Now, vulnerabilities, you can use different theoretical frameworks to arrive at the vulnerabilities, right? Biodynamic analysis gives you a very precise way of locating what the vulnerabilities might be, right? Now, how do you work with the vulnerabilities will depend, what vulnerabilities? Emotions. How will you work with these emotions will vary depending on your training. You know, someone might work with it, somebody who is trained in cognitive behavioral therapy might try to work with the emotions cognitively or behaviorally. Now, we don't think that it will work very well. Not that it will not work. Cognitive behavioral therapy is an effective treatment modality. We know that, no doubt. But any modality that does not involve the body, we know now, is working only at half capacity. Because cognition, emotion, behavior involve the body. And when the body is shut down one way or the other, then if you work with cognition, behavior, emotion, things can change, but it's not as effective as when you also work with the body to make it more open for cognition, emotion, and behavior. And the different body modalities work with it in different ways, right? Yeah. And for example, in ISP, I work with it by expanding the emotional experience in the body, right? But you can also bring in other ways of working with the vulnerabilities that you're already used to, right? And different therapy modalities are different ways of working with it. And cognitive behavioral therapy, I just brought it up because it just came up as the first example.
Yeah, I relate to what you said. I think embodiment itself is a very new element in China, and I know as a so much experiencing student, I also incorporate part of the body, and I see how effective that could help my therapy sessions to go. I think you have shared so much, and then I'm really interested in the demo that you're going to do, especially related to the Chinese theme. Yeah. And for our audience, if you're interested in learning more about it, please follow the link below and then scan the QR code to sign up for the demo that's happening in December. And we're looking forward to your lectures in February. And thank you so much, Raja, for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
好的，感谢大家提出的问题。那我们接下来呢，会进入到我们的问答环节。然后 Raja 老师已经在线了，我们接下来邀请我们的翻译 Tori 赵聪老师为我们进行翻译。那我会读一读大家问到的相关问题。那如果有补充的话呢，也可以随时继续进行补充。Hi Raja, nice to meet you here. Thank you for this wonderful lecture. Okay, I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay. I just wanted you to unmute me. Hello.
Oh, all right. So our interpreter today is Tori, and then she will give herself an introduction. 那我们接下来 ，Yeah， 我们接下来就从第一个问题开始。第一个问题比较的宽泛是问到想问经历过早期创伤的成年人应该怎么样去疗愈自己。我想它是一个非常大的问题，我们也可以邀请老师来为我们解答一下。
Hi, Dr. Raja. I'm Tori. So I'll be interpreting for you and the audience today. So we'll start with the first question. So the first question is that in terms of the say the childhood early stage trauma, how a grown-up adult can receive healings towards that.
The client comes in with a presenting problem. For example, they might come in typically with a problem that they have in a relationship, that they're not able to, bring their heart and genitals or sexuality together in their relationship. Yeah, that could be one presenting problem. Or they're afraid of getting close to the person. Yeah. Or they have a hard time in expressing their views, opinions to their partner for fear that the connection will be broken. These are different presenting problems, and they could come from a lack of development from certain stages of development. For example, the first presenting symptom that I cannot bring my heart and sexuality together might come from the Oedipal stage or the love sexuality stage of development, where the child was either shamed or criticized or inhibited for coming into their sexuality. In that age, children all over the world play doctor and nurse, or variations of that. And why don't I stop so that you don't have to translate a lot? Or do you want to, do you want to, I'll remember that I have to, let me complete it this time, but in answer to the next question, I will break it up so that you're not overwhelmed.
Yeah. You can finish this question, and the next question we can do like parts by parts.
Yeah. So the fear of getting close to someone could come very well from the existent stage of development, where the child might have experienced a pre and perinatal trauma that nearly threatened their life. For example, they were prematurely born and were in an incubator for a month. It could be that. Yeah. The third presenting symptom is that I cannot express my views. I'm very afraid to express my views, or in the presence of strong opinions of my partner, I lose mine. It could come from a later stage of development called opinion, where the child in that stage was not allowed to express its views. It could be that somebody at school, a teacher might have actually, the class teacher might have been very critical or punitive. So we can make a link between the client's presenting problem and a stage of development. Then we can inquire, with respect to whether our hypotheses are true. Yeah. And if we have enough evidence of the hypothesis that it belongs to a stage of development, then we know from the developmental theory what the vulnerabilities are likely to be. What do I mean by that? It could be shame, or it could be fear, it could be rejection, in any one of these stages. And the developmental theory tells us, then we start to work with those vulnerabilities, emotions, in whatever therapeutic training we have. Of course, we tend to favor, regardless of the therapeutic modality. For example, I'm psychoanalytically trained, but I'm also trained in Jungian analysis, and so I might use those frameworks, but I know whatever way I work with it, you might work with it with cognitive behavioral therapy, that if you don't bring the body in, you're going to be, running at half the capacity. You could be, because the body is very important for, the brain, body, and environment are very important for cognition, emotion, behavior. If you neglect one or two, then we have a problem. The psychotherapies that don't work with the body have the no body problem, right? And the body psychotherapies, I've been focusing on this a lot, these days have what is called the one body problem. We believe that there's only one body that we're dealing with. In ISP, in the integral somatic psychology approach, ISP approach, we work with more bodies, and I'm finding it more effective than just working with one body. And I worked with one body for a long period of time, and now I'm working with other bodies. So I find that people are learning faster, going deeper, etc. So, but regardless of what you use to work with the vulnerabilities, that's how you ultimately resolve developmental trauma. There's no way around the emotions. Yeah. In working with presenting symptoms that go back to developmental trauma. You cannot just regulate the body or medicate it away. So, yeah, that's a long answer. So let's avoid that next time. So
OK， 来回答一下第一个问题，就是当我们来访者有的时候会进来，就是做心理治疗的时候，他可能会带着一个实际生活上的一个问题，那这个问题往往都是跟个人的关系和情感关系是有关的。那有可能这个问题是属于说他可能在情感关系当中，他感觉他的性行为、性和爱是分离的一个状态，没有办法在一段关系当中都能够去获得性和爱，或者是比如说他在这段关系当中感觉他没有办法和他的这个伴侣产生一种亲密的关系，那又或者是说他在这段关系当中没有办法去表达自己的意见，发表自己的观点，因为他觉得一旦这样做了，这个关系有可能就破碎了。所以其实在 这些问题当中，我们都可以看到，在他早期的各个的发展阶段是肯定是有缺失的。那么，比如说，我们回到刚才第一个，就是在性爱，就是在性爱分离的这方面，就是他没有办法在一段关系当中同时体验到爱和性的满足的时候，有可能是在他的这个早期的叫性爱发展阶段，可能会受到了很多的批评，然后或者受到了一些身体上的羞辱。比如说，可能小孩子小的时候会喜欢玩这种过家家，就是像这种一个来扮演医生，一个扮演护士，然后去检查身体这种，其实它是对身体的一种探索。但是这个时候，如果说周围的环境对这种行为不是很认可，并且认为它是一个羞耻的行为的时候，它在这个发展阶段，它是肯定是有缺失的。那第二种情况，就刚才我们说的，如果说在感情当中，他觉得没有办法和自己的伴侣很亲近，那有可能是属于他在这个早期发展的存在阶段，会有一些产前或者外围的一些创伤，比如说他可能在就是可能差一点就是夭折这种情况发生。那么第三个像就是人们不能够在一段关系当中勇敢的去表达自己的观点和意见。那也是有可能，这种情况一般般是发生在后期的发展阶段，比如说他在，有表达意见的这个发展阶段的时候，可能是被打压的，有可能是比如说遇到了一个比较严格的老师，不太允许他去自由的发表意见，所以在每个问题当中，它其实都是会和早期的发展阶段的缺失是相关的。我们可以在这个过程当中先设置一个假设，比如说我们看到这个问题，然后认为它是与早期的这种发展过程中缺失有关，那我们通过问询的方式可以去找到更多的证据来支持我们的假设。如果我们一旦确定了我们的假设是正确的，那我们就能找到这个来访者他的脆弱性的点在哪里，要么是跟羞耻相关的，要么是跟恐惧相关，要么就是跟被拒绝之类的相关。所以我们要从当中找到他这个情绪点，在这个情绪点中，如你一旦找到这个情绪点，就会可以找到各种各样的方法，就是可以用不同的方法来去做相应的治疗。那么早期呢，像 Raja 他也是做。可能更多的是做情感精神科学这方面的，那也可以用一些认知行为的疗法。但是呢，在认知行为疗法当中，你要知道身体、大脑和环境是缺一不可的。所以你如果是在这三个因素当中忽视了任何一个因素，就都是会有很大的问题的。那么早期在 ISP 当中呢，就是大家都认为是有一个叫就是一身疗法，就是一个身体 one body。那么现在更多的可能去大家去看到是用多种身体的这种角度来去治愈的方法。所以无论你用什么方法，都是要非常确定它的这个脆弱性和情感点在哪里，然后找到你认为合适的一个治疗的方法就可以。
好
OK，
的，感谢感谢赵冲老师的翻译，非常牛逼。那么我们接下来看下一个问题。刚刚我看到王小磊老师有问到一个关于具体的时间点，就是每一个发展阶段和时间点的问题。那关于这个问题呢，大家可以参照我发在这个留言框里面的这张表格，或者是在我们群里的这张表格。老师今天说到的这个发展期阶段是基于 Biodynamic 躯体发展分析疗法的一个理论来构建的。那么相关的内容呢，可以参见这张表格哈。那么接下来下一个问题，让赵聪老师休息一下，我先把中文读出来之后读完英文，然后我们再邀请老师来翻译。那么这个问题是来自张怡的，然后可否请老师就自主性创伤举例 ，ISP 会大致如何去协助来访处理这阶段的创伤，以及临床上的重点是专注在扩展深入体验的神经容量，还是帮助他们去维持和更深入自己的体验，且能够和别人的需求共存。Could you please provide examples of autonomy trauma and explain how ISP generally assists client in addressing trauma at this stage? Additionally, is the clinical focus primarily on one, expanding the neural capacity for deeper experiences, two, helping clients sustain and deepen their experience while coexisting with the needs of others?
Yeah. You mean ISP or biodynamic analysis?
I think the question means ISP.
ISP. Okay. I'll say both. I'll answer both. The autonomy stage of development is from the age of 8 months to 2.5 years. Now, a stage of development in body dynamic analysis is not just chronological. It's defined by a set of related developmental functions that the child is learning to master so that they could be of service to the child as an adult throughout his or her life. Yeah, please translate.
刚刚说的就是这个，在自主发展阶段，一般情况下是这个孩子是8个月到2.5岁，就是2岁半的这个阶段。但是呢，这个我们看这个早期发展阶段，并不是说严格的只是看他的这个根据年龄来分的，我们主要是看他在每个阶段的发展功能。他这些阶段的发展功能，其实最终的服务呢，都是为了让这个孩子长大以后作为成人能够更好的生活以及适应这个社会。
And the autonomy stage of development has a number of developmental functions. For example, the ability to sense, to experience, the ability to have an experience and be able to hold on to it, even when other people are having different experiences. Two, the ability to sense the need for help and ask for help. The ability to know, 3, that we are interdependent.
Sorry, the 3 is independent or interdependent?
Interdependent. We are interdependent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
4, emotional development. The ability to regulate oneself and others emotionally, which is very important in attachment theory. That is happening in this stage of development. It's also, I think the next one is starting to develop a strong sense of self. Yeah? Please translate.
那么在自主阶段，其实这里面有一系列的功能，在这个阶段是需要发展的。首先，第一个呢，就是感知的功能，一个是感知自己的感受，感知自己的经验。那即便说是其他的经验和自己的感受是不同的，那同时你也能够确定并且认识到自己的感受就是自己的感受。那么第二个呢，就是我们能够发现自己需要帮助，以及能够去主动的寻求别人的帮助。那么第三个呢，就是意识。Sorry， 那么第三个呢，就是说我们人和人之间是互相依靠的这样的一个关系。是自主但是又互相依靠的关系。第4个呢，就是这一阶段的情感的发展，就是我们怎么样去控制自己的情感，怎么样去发展跟别人的情感。那这一阶段呢，也是我们之前说过的依恋理论，依恋理论也是在这个阶段是发展的，也是很重要。那第4个呢，就是我们会发展出自我的这个概念，能够感知到自我，并且认识到自我。
The question is addressing that one, addressing the ability to have an experience and be able to hold on to it when others have a different experience. Please translate.
那么刚才的这个就是说，问到了这个问题呢，其实也是有一点说是有点像是说能不能够维持深入自己的体验，并且能够有点像和别人的体验共存，即便说别人的体验和我们的是不一样的。
For the child to develop that ability, it needs support from the caregiver in the following way. That when a child, let's say, finds a new thing, an insect or a flower, is excited about it, brings it to the caregiver, it needs support from the caregiver to develop a capacity to stay with that experience. Yeah, please translate.
那么在这个阶段，在孩子自主的阶段呢，其实是需要很多作为这个辅助人的支持，就像我们现在说的父母的支持。那么首先，这个支持就包括，比如说一个孩子他拿了一朵花到父母面前，他非常的兴奋，非常高兴。这个时候，作为父母，你是需要给他提供情感支持的。然后要给他一个这样的肯定，这样的话他才能够去在这个体验当中维持住，并且去能够认可自己这样的一个很兴奋的体验。
For example, the caregiver or mother says, "Oh, that's a nice flower." Right? Let me look at it. Oh, that's nice. You found it. When the caregiver or mother does that, then the child feels supported, not only relationally, but also in the nervous system, in which it's having a difficult time containing the excitement of having found a new flower and a new experience. Please translate.
那么当这个母亲给予他一些回应的时候，比如说这个母亲看到了这个孩子拿来的花，他会肯定这个孩子说这个花非常漂亮，你在哪儿找到的呀？让我看一下。那其实他在这个程度上是给了孩子这样的，不仅仅是情感上的支持、关系上的支持，同时也是给了一种情感神经上的支持。这样的话，能够让孩子去能够充分的体验到他的情绪。
Now, think about what can happen if the caregiver says, "Go away, I'm busy," or the caregiver says, "Oh, look at this one, what I'm looking at on my cell phone. It's a bigger flower." In both cases, you have neglect, emotional neglect in the first case, and intrusion in the other case. In both cases, the child loses its ability to hold on to its experience. And this has also negative implications for the sense of self, developing sense of self, which I will explain a little after this is translated.
那么如果说这个母亲给了完全不同的反应，比如说孩子拿到花的时候，他跟孩子说：“我现在很忙，没有时间看。”或者是说：“你看我的手机，看我的手机上还有一个更大、更漂亮的花。”其实这两个反应就是一个是忽视了孩子的感受，一个就是打断了孩子的感受。所以其实如果这个孩子体会到这些的话，那么他会在自主阶段就会对自我的这样的一个认可，或者对自我的发展形成一个非常负面的影响。
We know through neuroscientific research that a sense of self is a product of experience.
那么在我们的情感神经科学的很多的研究是说，我们能够认知到自己是更多的是通过一系列的体验来完成的。
The more I can hold on to my experience and stay with it longer, the stronger the sense of self I develop.
那么我们对于体验的这种把持，对于体验的记忆和感知，如果说这种体验感越长，那么我们对自己的这个发展的认识也会越深刻。
I worked with a woman in Belgium 2 or 3 weeks ago in a developmental trauma workshop.
我3周之前也是，sorry, please finish.
Yeah, go on, complete that.
那我3周之前在比利时的时候，我是当时做了一个那个发展创伤的一个工作坊，也是当时是见到了一位女性。
Her presenting symptom was that she just lost her experiences when other people, emotions or impulses, when somebody else had a stronger opinion or stronger experience.
Sorry, so it means that she doesn't experience anything? Is that
She
what you
loses
mean?
it. She loses it.
OK. 那当时这个女性她的当时的症状就是说，她所有的体验感都消失了。
And to bring up that injury, I did a role play with her.
那我当
And
时
the
也是
role
跟他
play
做了一个角色的扮演。
and the role play is, tell me about something that you're very interested in. Tell me about a movie that you just saw that you were quite interested in. And then, while she was saying that, I was just looking at my watch, looking at my cell phone, you know, to trigger that injury.
那当时我那时候问他了一个问题，就是说你能告诉我你最近就是在做一些什么有趣的事情，或者你最近看了什么新的电影？然后在他说的时候呢，我就一直在看表或者看手机。其实我这样做的目的呢，就是为了想要去再次的去就是激发他以前的这些发展创伤。
In the ISP approach, we broaden the definition of emotion to always find an emotion.
那我们在
And
ISP 的
yeah,
在 ISP 的治疗的过程当中，其实我们很多情况下是在各种各样激发各种各样不同的情感当中找到那个正确的情感点。
so I had to look for whether this felt good for her or not.
所以在这个过程当中，其实我是要看到他的这个体验感是好还是坏。
Not feeling good is an emotion.
如果说他觉得不好，也是一个情绪。
And we locate it in the body, and by using techniques for expanding and regulating the body, we expanded the emotion in the body.
所以我们也是通过扩大他这个情感点来去找到他身体当中的那个点。
Then we could tap the experience of losing a sense of self and how bad it felt. And, the emptiness that she felt because she lost her experience and the sadness she felt about it, etc. Please
那其实
translate.
那其实通过这些体验感当中，我通过这些不同的体验当中，其实是为了激活他的一些对于这个没有自我或者失去自我的这样的一个痛苦。那么他这个空虚感和他这些悲伤，其实都是他失去自我带来的情绪。
I could have also used an interaction she had with the partner in which it happened to bring up the wound and the emotions to work with it.
那同时呢，我其实也可以是通过他和他的爱人和他的亲密的关系的另外一半的一些这种互动的方式来去看他的一些早期发展的问题。
I want to share this with you, not in response to this question. I've often wondered how the developmental theory interacts with Chinese culture. That is, for example, the one-child policy or the separation of children from their parents. They're of course being cared for by grandparents. The history of being with your parents but not consistently, the parents being absent for long periods of time. How do these unique cultural aspects of Chinese culture interact with the developmental trauma? I'm actually curious to find out. I can imagine, but it would be interesting to find out as I work with more people from China.
所以也跟大家在这里做一个分享，可能跟这个问题无关，就是我也是一直很好奇，就是这个发展，我们这些早期的发展的这个理论怎么样和中国文化结合到一起？比如说我们现在中国的很多像我们独生子女政策，导致很多家庭里面就是一个孩子长大的，那也有很多的是祖父母照顾长大的，可能跟父母在一起的时间，但是并不是长期的在一起，包括我们现在这个现在的一些小孩也都是基本上是由爷爷奶奶姥姥姥爷带大的，所以其实我也很好奇，就是在这个发展创伤和这些我们中国的这些家庭文化里面，到底是有什么样的关系？我也是希望能够 通过更多的这个中国的来访者来去看一看这里边到底是什么样的一个情况。
I think next question here.
我们可以下一个问题。
Sure, thank you. So the next question, 下一个问题是来自左木子同学的。那当具有存在加上需求阶段的复杂性创伤的来访开始浮现出对于进入关系的强烈恐惧，并对此压抑和否认，且对咨询师产生了非常强烈的负向移情的情况下，咨询师可以怎么帮助来访更能够回到当下，以便可以继续合作，进而要如何与这种强烈的恐惧进行工作呢？So when a client with complex trauma at existence and need stage begins to exhibit intense fear of entering relationships, suppress or denial their fears, and develop strong negative transference towards the therapist, how can the therapist help the client return to the present moment to facilitate continued collaboration? And also, how can the therapist work with such intense fear?
Yeah. Oh, you've already read it in Chinese, right? So first we try to determine which stage is contributing to the fear. If it's from existence, the fear is one of being annihilated, being killed by the world. If it's need, it's the fear of all the emotions that could surface if the caregiver does not meet their needs. So the fear will be around about one thing or the other. That we have to determine, right? And then we have to work with the fear, and the way we work with the fear emotion is to, again, to experience it in as many places as possible, because research shows us that when the body is blocking the involvement of fear, the brain doesn't work well to process the situation. This is the research on embodied emotions, and we try to expand and regulate the body to expand and regulate the emotion in the body. Now we need to have, it's intense, therefore we need to have tools that are, strong enough. And we don't just depend on tools at one level of the body. We have other levels of the body we also tap into in order to contain and safely experience, relatively speaking, the experience of fear in the body. Regarding transference, I will answer once this is translated.
那首先呢，我们需要去确定它这个恐惧感到底是在哪个阶段发生的。如果是在存在阶段发生的话，那可能就意味着它本身的这个当时的是生存受到了一些威胁，可能是觉得自己本身的这个本身的这个生命存在就是有威胁的。那么如果是在需求阶段发生的话，那有可能就是说他的一些情感开始浮现的时候，父母并没有满足他的一些情感需求。所以我们其实在看这个恐惧感的时候，我们需要在不同的地方去体验，因为他的身体其实已经屏蔽了这个恐惧感。那我们这个时候就需要在身体层面上去不断的扩大，并且去寻找这样的他的这个恐惧感在的地方。那所以我们也是需要有一个强有力的工具才能解决，而且这个工具不能只用在这个我们身体上的单纯的一个层面，我们要在不同的身体的层面上用这个工具去寻找。
If the person is transferring existential fear or oral fear on the therapist, they will just not come back. Now, typically, they develop existential rage or oral rage toward the therapist. They stay and they fight. and threaten to leave.
所以如果这个人他是有在存在感阶段产生的这个恐惧感的话，他是会对这个心理咨询师会产生非常强烈的愤怒感。那么这个愤怒感，他是会对心理咨询师说，会威胁，说我不会再回来去继续做心理咨询了。
There are two ways to work with transference, strong transference. One way is to interpret the transference by saying to the client, from your history, the knowledge of your history, I can see that this reaction could be coming from, the danger you felt in the incubator after a difficult birth, or from the practice of your being fed only on schedule, not when you need it in the need stage of development. So one is interpretation, and this can work. Go on.
那么其实关于刚才说的，就是他的这个情感，负面情感转移到咨询师上，我们其实可以有2种方法来去，对应。那么第一个呢，就是去理解这种，我们试着去理解、去了解这个愤怒的这个转移。你可以跟来访者说，从我对你的了解和从我对你的这个了解的历史来看，那么你的这种反应，我了解到是可能是在你出生的时候经历了一个非常，就是你可能差一点夭折了，所以这个对你来讲，这出生的时候是经历了很大的危险的。又或者说是在你小的时候，可能你那个时候只能是按时间点吃饭，所以你其实是你的食物上是得不到满足的。
And we'll add to that. So let us work with the anger and work with other underlying vulnerabilities.
所以我们其实要先处理这个愤怒，我们要处理完了这个愤怒之后呢，再找到它的脆弱性的点在哪。
The second way to work with it is to work in the transference. The way the like in traditional psychoanalysis, where the therapist says, I see that you're really angry with me. I would like to know how you experience it in your body. I want you to express it to me. Yeah, and I'm really interested in it. And I'm particularly interested in how you experience it in your body in an expanded way. That, or I experience, or if you're afraid of me, then I'm really interested in that. If I hurt you, I'm really interested in that. How deeply it has hurt you. Can we go into your body to experience that? So I would work in the transference with the difference in ISP is that I would ask them to experience it in the body and express it to me. Please.
那么第二个呢，就是我们直接的去理解这个，我们直接的去解决它这个负面情绪转移的这个问题。那么在传统的精神分析当中呢，可能这个咨询师会跟来访者说，我现在知道你非常生气，那么你能不能告诉我，就是说你现在的身体的感受是什么样？你身体的体验感在哪里？或者说你的身体的在这种愤怒的情况下，它的变化以及这个愤怒感有没有扩展到其他的地方？那么或者是说，你可以跟来访者说，如果说你怕我，那么这样的话，那你现在的感受，身体上的感受是如何？那么如果我伤害了你，那我还是想知道你现在身体的变化如何。所以在 ISP， 在我的这个 ISP 过程当中，我会让来访者去深刻的了解他身体上的一些经历和反应。
好的，我们来到下一个问题。听起来 ISP 是会帮助来访者把现在的问题和模式都追溯定位到起源的年龄和事件，像是一个诊断地图一样，然后再与当时的受伤经验工作。 是这样吗？那么在后续处理这个受伤经历的方面和 SE 的做法有何不同呢？So it sounds like ISP helps clients trace and locate their current issues and patterns back to the originating age and event, and like creating a diagnostic map, and then work with the wounding experience at that time. Is that correct? If so, how does this, subsequent processing of the wounding experience or traumatic experience differ from the approach used in SE?
So the ISP is only about how to heal by embodying the emotion. Yeah. In the developmental trauma work, we used the body dynamic analysis model, its developmental theory, to trace the current presenting problem back to a developmental stage and a developmental injury in that stage. Can you translate that?
所以 ISP 它其实是再去了解，就是我们怎么样去治愈我们身体上具身的情感，就是怎么样去治愈我们具身的这些创伤。所以它只是针对于治愈。那么在发展创伤当中，我们会运用到一些这个身体动力、情感这方面去追溯我们身上我们发展的创伤是具体是在哪个发展阶段发生的。
What is the difference between SC and ISP in working with emotion? The difference is this. In SC, when there's an emotion, we teach people, I've taught somatic experiencing for 30 years, we teach people to go from the emotion to sensation in the body. And observing the sensations in the body at the same time you have an emotion regulates the emotion down. This is not a characteristic of SC, but also other modalities that use the tool of tracking body sensations to regulate experience, focusing, mindfulness-based stress reduction, for example. Please translate that.
那么 ISP 和 SE 在情感治疗上有什么不同呢？那么 SE 是我大概是教了这个 SE 大概有 SE 情感治疗有30年的时间。那么 SE 在治疗情感当中，我们首先确定他的这个情感之后呢，是让这个情感去真正的让他在身体上得到了一个感应，就是你从这个情感带到你的身体去做感应，同时你去观察你身体的变化，以及把这个情感带到身体里面去，进而调节情绪。
An unpleasant emotion is a state of dysregulation in the body. And when I pause, can you just translate that sentence? When I pause?
Yeah. 那么在负面情绪其实就是在 SE 当中，就是身体是可以在身体当中调节的。
The tool of tracking body sensation is a very powerful tool.
那么我们去用这种工具去调节这个负面情绪在身体上的感知，是一个非常有用的工具。
It can quickly regulate the body to a neutral state.
它能很快的，这个工具能够很快的把这个身体调节到一个平衡的状态。
And when we train our body when we give the brain that tool, it will automatically go to the tool because the brain doesn't like the body suffering.
那么其实我们在训练大脑去用这个工具的时候呢，我们大脑会很快的识别这个工具，因为我们的身体其实对于负面情绪是有排斥的。
I'll give you an example. Years ago, at the beginning of my practice as an SE therapist, people who used to do the Vipassana style of meditation, in which body sensations are tracked a lot, came to me with the symptom of panic attacks.
那我给大家举个例子，就是很多年前我在做 SE 治疗方法的时候，我会当时是会让来访者做一系列这种冥想。那么他们在做冥想的时候，经常是会有惊恐症发作。
I would ask them, where do they sense the anxiety in the body?
那我会问他们，就是你们身体的感知，在惊恐症发作的时候，你们身体的感知是在哪儿？
And they will close their eyes and immediately become peaceful.
那么他们闭上眼睛之后，他们很快就进入了一个非常平和平静的状态。
And I asked them, what did you do?
然后我问他，你做了什么？
And they said, well, we go to the body, notice where the fear is, and then look for sensations, or very minute sensations beneath the fear.
那么他们就说，我回到了我的身体当中，然后我在寻找这个惊恐症发作的这种恐惧感，然后我在一直的寻找各种各样我身体上层面的这种感知。
And the fear disappears.
然后这个时候的恐惧感就消失了。
Yeah, so they found another way to not feel and stay with the emotions so that the brain can process it.
所以其实在这个过程当中，其实他们在寻找的过程当中，在这种情绪当中，他的大脑同时也感知到了这种寻找的过程，然后相当于是连接到了一起。
Tracking meaningless body sensations and meaningful emotions are tracking of the body experience on two different levels.
所以追溯身体上的这种情感，是可以分两个层面的。
For example, if a friend were to ask you, your relationship just ended, how do you feel?
比如说，如果一个朋友问你，就是你刚刚分手了，你现在感觉如何？
Now, you don't typically say, oh, I have a very strong tightness in my back and, no energy in my arms.
一般情况下，你不会说这样回答，就是说，我觉得我后背肌肉挺紧的，或者我觉得我的手臂感觉无力，
Or my breathing is more difficult.
或者你也不会说我最近的这个呼吸感觉好像有点困难。
I would say, I don't feel good.
一般情况下，大家都会说我感觉不太好。
So I've abstracted meaning from these sensations to arrive at emotion. Not feeling good. It's meaningful.
所以其实他会把所有的这种具象化的东西变成一个抽象的概念，就是我感觉不好。
I would expand that at that level, not go down to the level of lack of breath, tightness here, no energy here, because doing that will regulate the body toward neutrality. I will actually feel good or neutral.
所以他其实在说他回答不好的时候，他会就是我会在这个层面上去更多的去扩展他这个情绪，而不是说去回到他的身体，比如说我的后背紧或者什么的。因为你一旦回到他的身体的时候，他其实整个身体状态就是平衡了，平衡之后他就会觉得他好像感觉还不错。
The Somatic Experiencing Institute and I are in talks to offer a course with demonstrations on how to improve the practice of SE.
那么 SE 其实也是有一个课程的，就是专门怎么样去实践 SE 的这些理论和这些实践的方法。
And this is one of them, how to work with emotions in a different way, by expanding rather than regulating it down through tracking body sensation.
那其实这个也是我们课程当中的一个方法，就是在一个情绪点出来的时候，我们是要根据这个情绪点，抓住这个情绪点去扩大它，而不是说把这个情绪点再追溯到身体当中。
But let me say the following, that that a system needs a little bit of improvement doesn't mean that it's not a good one.
那我想说的就是说，我要说的一点就是说，这个系统可能会需要更多的，比如说这个系统框架需要一定的发展和改进，但是并不代表说这个系统框架就是不好的。
SE works the trauma through the body.
那么 SE 它是针对于身体创伤做的一系列的疗愈。
There's a survey that was done 2 years ago.
2年前我们也是有一个问卷。
Of all trauma therapists who use a method that also works with the body.
那基本上所有的这个身体创伤的疗愈师，基本上都是会以身体为切点去进行疗愈的。
All over the world.
全世界都是这样。
And what they found is that SE is the number one modality among trauma therapists who work with the body.
所以他们发现了，就是 SE 它整个的就是我们的这个心理咨询师是通过身体来去疗愈人们的心理创伤。
Here I'm talking about how to improve it even more in different ways, including working with emotion in the body.
那我在这里说的就是我们怎么样去更好的去改进这个系统，然后可能是再去探讨一下有没有其他的去疗愈情感的一些方式。
好的。
Next question. Yeah.
I think our time is up for today. We'll probably have to end here today, Raja.
Okay.
Thank you so much. 我刚刚也是在跟老师说，我们今天的时间呢已经到了，所以很遗憾哦。我接下来有看到有很多很好的问题，我们可能没有办法在这里一一作答，但是非常鼓励大家在我们的群里面可以继续讨论。然后我也看到大家有非常多的问题是关于个案或者是关于自己的，也像老师今天所说到的，就是在我们中国的这个发展的过程之中，有很多和我们本土相关的一些特点，比如说他提到的这个就是独生子女或者是留守儿童等等的一些问题。然后老师今天也说到的这个发展型创伤的几个阶段是一个比较大的框架哈。那接下来大家对于如何把框架里面的理论放入到实践上，那怎么样去具身这个发展创伤所带来的情绪然后怎么样去做情绪的扩展等等，我想对于这些实操上面的部分也许还是保有疑问的。那么在下个月呢，我们会邀请 Raja 老师针对于我们中国特色的或者是中国本土所出现的一些发展型创伤来做3个演示课程。那他会使用他的 ISP 和 SE 等等结合的方法来做一个现场的演示干预。那么如果对这个课程感兴趣的同学们呢，可以关注我们群里的信息那同时在接下来下一年大家也可以关注新浪潮的公众号，我们会引入 Raja 老师的发展型课程发展型创伤的系列课。那在系列课程里面呢，会展开讲一讲到底是哪7个发展阶段，然后这些阶段都有一些什么样的特点。那同时我也看到有同学们在问，就是他老师提到的这个诊断工具评估工具是什么，稍后我们会把这个部分发在说翻译好的这个诊断的部分发在我们的群里，所以也邀请大家去关注群里的信息。那么很高兴今天在星期二的晚上和大家一起度过了1个小时40分钟希望大家都学有所成。如果有任何的疑问，也欢迎大家继续在群里面进行讨论。那我们今天的讲座就到这里，非常感谢大家的参与，希望在下一次的讲座上再见到大家。大家晚安。